All right, it's basically a favorite topic today here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Oh, let's adjust the lighting. It's a bit bright, but great to see all of you here at noon Eastern time on a Tuesday. Of course, we'll take your comments, your questions, your debate topics, and everything else. We always talk all of college football, whatever you want. You produce the show ultimately. I like to, at least in the last few weeks and going forward, to pick out a topic. It seems to spark the conversation, spark the debate, and maybe bring some more attention, some more eyes to what we do here. So again, great to see everybody out there here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And for those of you who have been watching me for a period of time, especially dating back to last offseason when I produced videos on disputed champions, you know this is one of my favorite topics because on one hand, I think they're all disputed to some degree that they're all disputed. 24 on the line, remind everyone that this is all possible because of revenue, that we're in the business of keeping this going and doing this every day for you and for the college football community. So add to the community by jumping online, sharing these videos out on social media. Share every video, share the ones that you like, share the ones that you think will cause great discussion and debate. Share your team's video. If you're a Florida fan, we produce Florida videos on a regular basis. For example, share those videos. Whatever your choice is there, we would ask that you would share the videos out on social media here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And again, the comments in the live chat and the debate that's brought forward on the calls is strictly up to you. We do not have to talk about the topic at hand, but that's the one that came to mind for today. And let's see, disputed championships. We posted videos last off season featuring 1983, 1984, 1990, those 3 seasons for sure. And I think there was another one in there, whether it was 91 or 2000. I'll have to go back and look because I would like to start on those again if that's what you guys want to see. So let's see, what's our stipulation on our next video? Whatever year gets the most votes down in the comment section. So down in the comment section, not in the live chat, but once the video has posted, whatever year gets the most votes, minimum, we need about 100 votes. Let's go 100 votes, 100 likes, and at least 1,000 views on this video, which isn't many, but let's go that. It's all right. I will take, not that I'm not going to do more because sometimes I just do my favorites, but once we get to 1,000 views and 100 likes, that should be pretty easy. And again, whatever the highest vote total is on what year, based on 100 votes, not 100 for the winner, but 100 total votes on what year you would like to see me review the national championship race. So what I did with 1983, 84, and 90, and whatever other year I did, was I would take that year and explain what happened, what the race looked like coming down the stretch, what each team did, what they did in postseason play. Well, prior to postseason, what were the rankings? Where did the national championship race stand at that point? And then what happened in postseason play in the bowl games? How did that affect the standings, the rankings, and who was declared national champion? And then following that, to break down the flawed portion of it. Of course, that's the reason I'm doing it. And then beyond that, to basically take it as, okay, this is what this particular year would have looked like in a different era. Had this same situation happened, let's say, in the BCS era, it would have played out like this most likely. Take it to the college football playoff era, it would have played out like this. It's a whole lot of fun. I love doing it, but I want to get your feedback to see who I'm pleasing the most in regards to not my analysis, but in terms of who wants to see what years. All right, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, I'm all about your topics and your analysis, Mark Rogers.
Beautiful. Love it, David. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to tell you threw this out there. I have a few years. Okay. I know you did 1990. Did you do 1991 as well?
I don't think so. I think I did 2000. I did another one, but I can't remember whether it was 2000 or 91.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess the real debate is from 98, really, obviously through the playoff era, you could just debate either the championship game or playoff teams, really, is the debate, from that time frame. Although you could, I guess, debate 2003, which was the only shared national championship of the BCS era, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
2003. 2003, yes. I can debate them all.
Yeah.
I think they can all be debated to some degree.
Okay.
Even this past year, it can be debated. Now, within the system, Alabama played the best. They were the best. It cannot be in any way challenged that Alabama, within the system, was the best team, and they were the best team. But the reason I would challenge this year is that the fourth position was debatable. Therefore, there were not teams present in the playoff that were not given the opportunity that, let's say, Notre Dame was.
Right. Because, like in the past, I think you've debated which did they get the right top four correct.
Yes.
Basically.
And actually, I agreed with the committee. So I'm not. This is not me pouncing on the committee this year. I agreed with the committee. I'm just saying, in a better system or an expanded system, that we would have had teams that had a similar resume to Notre Dame in the playoffs.
Okay.
Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Oklahoma.
Right. Well, in the BCS era, then you would just debate who should have been and shouldn't have been in the championship game, then bottom line.
Yeah, and I understand in 2002 we had two undefeated teams, so it was just a bad system, but the two teams within the system were clearly the undefeated teams, and so I know we had a couple of those years where it basically worked out.
Right. Yeah, I think 2002 was right, 2005 was right, because I think Texas and USC were the only two undefeated teams that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So, I mean, I know I've said this before, I think if we went down, because the BCS championship game went from 1998 to 2013, because the playoffs started in 2014. I think from 98 to 13, in my view, if we went through every year, I think they got it right more than they got it wrong.
Okay.
Have you looked at that, those 15, 16 years there?
Sure. I've looked at them. I believe I would say it this way. I believe that they got it. I believe they got it wrong more than they got it right. And then there are a clump of years in there in which there were teams, they didn't necessarily get it wrong, but there were teams left out that just had just as much of a right. They were placed in a, they being the system, the voters, plus the combination of the voters and the formula, the computers, placed in a situation where there was no winning. There was no clear cut. Therefore, there were teams left out that had just as good of argument.
Okay.
I think that was the majority of the time.
I got it. Okay. Well, let me throw out a couple years here in the 90s, and then I can throw out a couple of BCS years, and let me see what you think, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. In the 90s, what about 1993 and 1994?
To me,
debate in 90.
Yep. Go ahead.
Right. In 93 is their debate with Florida State getting it, even though they lost to Notre Dame that year. And then 94, Penn State not getting a share with Nebraska.
Okay, so to me, in 1993, it's pretty clear cut that it was wrong. Why does a team that won a head-to-head matchup with another team where they both played similar schedules in terms of strength of schedule, especially, and I don't even think that that should be the paramount debate, but they did. Notre Dame played just as good a schedule as Florida State, or roughly, that they won the head-to-head meeting and they both had one loss. I don't see. I think that's ridiculous.
I mean, the thing that happened is Notre Dame lost the very next week, though.
Sure.
So, but by them losing the very next week, could you just keep their ranking, or what could you have done with them? And then on top of that, remember at the time you had an undefeated West Virginia out there and an undefeated Nebraska.
Did West Virginia go into the bowl game against Florida undefeated?
They did. They got stomped by Florida in the Sugar.
All right. And then Nebraska was undefeated, and they lost to Florida State in the Orange Bowl.
Correct.
Okay. Because I would have to go. I know everything that happened off the top of my head, but in regards to the exact records, I would have been going back and looking at that. So based on that scenario, then Nebraska and West Virginia should have been playing in the national championship game, right?
Right. And I think that was the debate at the time, I believe, because, Florida State lost to Notre Dame in that epic game, and then Notre Dame loses the next week to Boston College, and Glenn Foley and Tom Coughlin.
Now, people need to understand when I dive into this stuff, there's a difference in my mind between who's most, at least under the system, most clearly earned it versus who the better teams are or the best teams. Because West Virginia got shellacked in the Sugar Bowl against Florida.
Right.
Florida? Yeah. Yeah, they got shellacked. And at the time, I didn't think West Virginia was one of the best teams, but they were undefeated. So, again, that's why there's a playoff that needs to be implemented.
Okay, so in that situation, we probably should have had Nebraska versus West Virginia maybe in the championship game. It shouldn't have even had Florida State versus Nebraska.
Yeah, that would be my argument, that we have two undefeated teams. So why weren't they good enough at that time? But then in other years, we considered the two undefeated teams to be clear cut, and that when they played, we thought everything was nice and easy and clean cut.
That's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one.
Now that,
yeah.
I think back on it. And then also we have to think during this time frame there wasn't a BCS, and all these teams were committed to certain bowl games.
Yeah. Because
so that's the other thing.
It's funny it's funny that Nebraska, and not only did Nebraska and West Virginia not play, but then the two teams that could have rematched in the bowl game, Notre Dame and Florida State, didn't play. The Florida State-Nebraska matchup makes sense to a certain degree. You can't argue with that. West Virginia just wasn't regarded as being on the same plane or tier as those other teams. That's all there was to it.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that year. I thought West Virginia did have some quality victories, if I'm not mistaken, but I thought they may have. But I'd have to look back on that.
Yeah, I would definitely.
All right, 94. Do you still think that Penn State deserved this share?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it similar to 1997.
Okay, you should have just split it just like you did in 97.
Yeah.
Okay. I tend to agree with you that year. And do you remember why that year they didn't get a share or what the justification was?
I know they had a late season game at Illinois that was a little ugly, like a 35-29 game. I think that was the week that they dropped from number 1 to number 2 in at least one, if not both, of the polls, and then that held the rest of the season. And they also
Right.
didn't play as quality competition in the Rose Bowl as Nebraska did in the. I always get this mixed up because Nebraska played Tennessee in '97 and '99. One was an Orange Bowl, one was a Fiesta Bowl. I think it was the Fiesta Bowl.
Right.
Regardless, they beat up on Peyton Manning and company. And look, on that day, although Penn State won by 18 in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, beat a decent Oregon team from what I remember.
Yeah.
But I think you're right because they beat Miami was like number 3 or 4 at the time, and that's who Nebraska beat the Orange.
They beat Tennessee. Oh no, 90. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up. I'm going back to 97, 94. Yes.
Right. Yeah, they beat a pretty good Florida.
Yeah.
Actually, probably the last good Miami team of that era before Eric Simmons go jet to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
I would say
wasn't Miami undefeated before that game?
I think they had lost a game. I think they had lost a game, and I'm not sure who they lost to that year.
Yeah.
But they were definitely a top 5 team that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
All right, let me ask you about a couple BCS years. Let me throw out a couple BCS years and see if they got it right. Well, first of all, let me start off with the early years. Do you think 2000 and 2001, they got the right teams in the championship game? Should Florida State have been playing Oklahoma in 2000?
No.
Okay. I think that was pretty obvious.
Yeah. I go the round robin with Washington.
Well, you'd have gone with Washington in the championship game?
They beat Miami.
That's true. And then, even though, because Miami beat Florida State that year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Washington had a loss, though, if I'm not mistaken, that year.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember they beat Drew Brees and Purdue in the Rose Bowl.
Yes, they did.
Okay, so you'd have put Washington in. Now, 2001, would you have put Oregon in, the Joey Harrington Oregon team against Miami instead of Nebraska?
All right, I would have to look at the records, but that was Nebraska's first loss in the Colorado game, 62-26, right, on the day after Thanksgiving. Oregon, I don't have it in front of me who they lost to, but they were 10-1 or 11-1. They had to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, did Colorado have 2 losses or 1? Because they played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl.
Right, I believe they had 2. That's why they were out of it.
Okay. Yes, I think Oregon played, if my memory serves me, in regards to the schedule was better, the loss wasn't as damaging. Well, it obviously was. But in reasonable thought, they just played a better season, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think they were the only other major one-loss team that was out there besides Nebraska at that particular period of time, if I'm not mistaken. Because I think there was just a bunch of other teams that had 2 losses.
Yeah, it was not a great year from that standpoint.
That was right. I think Nebraska kind of got in there basically by default.
Yeah, they did. And it's not so much a situation in which after the fact that Nebraska played so horribly in the national championship game that people were like, oh, well, they obviously didn't belong. This was pretty well determined before the championship game, myself included, that didn't think that they would be able to compete in the championship game.
Right. Yeah, well, that Miami team is an all-timer, I think. Well, most Miami fans probably feel that way, too. I think that at least Oregon, maybe with their quarterback, would have been able to compete certainly a little bit better than Nebraska, I think, would have.
Yeah, I would think so. Yep.
More competitive. Okay. All right. Last one.
Yeah.
BCS here. I'll just throw this one out to you, Mark. 03. Should they have done a split that year, or do you think that they should have just? Why didn't LSU and USC play that year? I don't understand that.
Because there was still an agreement between the Big Ten and the Pac-12 that they would land in the Rose Bowl. That lasted a couple more years, that their champions would go to the Rose Bowl regardless. Wasn't that the deal?
So I thought that agreement was broken once the BCS came along.
Well, then it just came down to, I know, yeah. Then it just came down to Oklahoma being higher ranked than USC. USC was number 3.
Okay.
In the BCS standings. Yeah, Oklahoma and LSU were they both undefeated, or did LSU have a loss? Again, I gotta.
LSU had a loss. USC had a loss. And remember, Oklahoma got pasted by Kansas State in the Big 12 title campaign.
Yeah. Yeah, 35-7. Yes, they did.
Right, like the Buckeyes beat Kansas State in the Fiesta that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I still wondered how Oklahoma got in that championship game after getting killed like that. And they just wouldn't have done, USC and LSU to begin with. Because, again, I thought that once the BCS came around, that Pac-12, Big Ten thing was over. Because there were some Rose Bowls before that, Mark. There were Big Ten and Pac-12, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The Ohio State national championship season was an Oklahoma-Washington State Rose Bowl. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That one was.
Yeah, well, there was no Pac-12 championship game. USC had played one less game. I can about verify that. There was no Pac-12 championship game like there was a Big 12 championship game. And, the BCS, the formula, again, this is my gripe with the BCS, that in 2 occasions in 3 years that they usher in a team that got just blasted the last game of the season into the championship game. Especially that year with USC sitting right there. And I would have been surprised had that not been a really good game.
Well, the thing about it is, Mark, is they probably just tried to make amends by letting LSU and USC split the title in 2003. But maybe realized that they messed up, so let's just have them split. You think that was their way of just kind of compensating? Oh,
sure. Yeah, the AP poll. There was, obviously the winner of the BCS championship game had a national championship to its credit. And the AP still voted after the season and still voted USC as number 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of weird because, again, in the playoff BCS era, that's the only split national title. So, kind of one for the books right there.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark. Well, it's always fun kind of going over these. I hope we threw out a few good ones today.
Oh, you did, for sure. And, I would like to get back into the business of reviewing these seasons and why other teams should be considered. Yeah.
All right, my friend. As always, a pleasure, Mark. You take care of yourself.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Again, it took me forever to get this monitor going. This thing just falls asleep like every 3 seconds and won't go back to functional forming. All right, USC in 2003. It's so nice to have a laptop and a monitor, which I didn't have for pretty much the entire football season. Just had to work off memory for everything, which doesn't always serve me well. That 2003 USC team lost at Cal. They lost to Cal, an unranked team at the time, 34-31 in triple overtime. So that was USC's loss that season, a triple overtime game at Cal, 34-31. They beat Auburn, who was number 6 at the time, in the opener, 23-0. They beat Washington State, who was number 6, 43-16. Like, they beat some good teams by a lot. They beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Michigan was number 4, 28-14. All right, good to see everyone in the chat again. Disputed national championships. These videos were well received. I appreciate that. Last off season, I produced 1983, 84, 90, and I think another one. I think it was 2000, but I'll have to go back. And so if you would like to see more of these, and if DeAndre's on the line, if he's watching, which he might be at work in the middle of the day, DeAndre's basically, he is for sure going to tell me to do more of these because he would like every year diagnosed. And I think it's a whole lot of fun too. But if people aren't interested, then I'm not going to carve through 50 years of college football. All right. So again, whichever season receives the most votes in the comment section of the video, not the chat, because I don't want to be streaming through a chat. If we can go to the comment section after the video posts, whichever year receives the most votes, I will review that year, in addition to the likes and the views. So hopefully we can hit those numbers, and would love to do that. All right. Jordan's favorite is 2003. Rod Farva, 2003 as well. Yes, I've already done that. Rod Farva, I've got a video posted 1984. I absolutely went after that one. I believe that would have been a great game. USC LSU 2003. Just like it figures that in 2004 that USC and Auburn would have been a much better game. Auburn got ripped off. There's your last SEC team that ever got ripped off. Auburn in 04. You got to think that they would have played USC tougher than Oklahoma. I watched, not start to finish because it was 55-19, but I watched through the competitive portion, which wasn't a whole lot, of that USC-Oklahoma game a few months ago. The onslaught didn't start immediately. I think Oklahoma got out of the first quarter in decent shape, and then the second quarter was just an annihilation, just big play after big play after big play, and maybe the halftime score was, maybe it was something like 34-7, something like that, which I believe was the halftime score of the Florida-Ohio State game in 06. I think it was 34-7 at half. No. Couldn't have been 34-7. Because Ohio State scored a touchdown with Antonio Pittman having a nice drive to cut it to 27-14, I believe. That was the last, no, 21-14. I think Ohio State cut it to 21-14, and that was the last time they had a shot, 21-14 in that Florida game. Ohio State in 03 went to Wisconsin. Chris Gamble was beaten on coverage on a deep pass to Lee Evans, the Wisconsin receiver who went to play for the Buffalo Bills. Lee Evans. See, my mind, I gotta just think for a second. Lee Evans beat Chris Gamble, and I believe Ohio State lost that game 17-10. Lost to Wisconsin, still had a shot. So Ohio State would have been playing LSU in the BCS championship game had they beaten Michigan. No Big Ten championship game, of course. That was still 7 years away. Ohio State at Michigan. Michigan had 2 losses, so Michigan was not going anywhere. Ohio State had the 1 loss, had risen all the way to 2 or 3, I think up to number 3 in the BCS standings before they went to Ann Arbor. And of course, the Oklahoma loss was forthcoming against Kansas State in 03. And that Ohio State team chucked it around pretty well against Michigan, but Chris Perry just battered the Buckeyes defense. 35-21. Ohio State got down early, 28-7. They got within 28-21 in the fourth. Looked like they had a shot. Gave up a touchdown late to lose by 2 scores. Again, that was basically Krenzel having one of his better passing days with Santonio Holmes catching a few touchdowns, Michael Jenkins, and those guys. I think David had called, and we talked about Jim Tressel being able to throw the ball when he needed to, and that team had to throw down 21 in the second half to Michigan, and they almost came back and won. I know David likes that 05 Ohio State team. I do as well. I thought that they were exceptional. They had think how great Texas was. Think of the reputation that 05 Texas team has now for slaying the giant USC, going undefeated, winning the national championship. I believe still the highest rated national championship game on television ever. And that Texas reputation, that brand, was aided for a few more years because of that game, of course, but also just that team is just considered legendary. And Ohio State was that close to possibly playing in that game. Now, the one issue there would have been Ohio State should have beat Texas. They had them down. They outplayed them, the whole deal. They dropped a touchdown pass, Ryan Hamby in the end zone. That would have extended a lead to, I believe, 10. I believe Ohio State was up by 3. They would have gone up by 10. They only went up by 6. Anyway, they lose 25-22, I think was the final. But the issue there would have been that Ohio State would have tied Penn State for first place in the Big Ten. And Penn State still won the head-to-head, and Penn State only had 1 loss. So most likely the national championship game still would have been USC and Penn State. Good to see Michael in the chat as well. Jordan, Michael, Rod, Lewis, 18 inches. Yikes. Yeah, I don't know why Justin Swick had to play in that 05 game against Texas. I know Tressel didn't know as much about Troy Smith at that point, but the 04 Michigan game was all you needed to see from Troy Smith. So there's Ronan's disputed national championship, of course, it just completely takes us in another direction, because I'm talking about the system screwing us, screwing teams, and the matchups that could have been. Ronan's taking it to the officials' call, which, should I do this sometime? Should I actually, I now have the technology with a bunch of stuff that you can't see that I don't know how to use, but I now have the technology that we could sit and watch a game, an old game. We could sit and watch a game, go through it, and maybe we watch Ohio State Miami from 02-03. Or at least watch the fourth quarter. Because Ohio State, their final drive, they could have held on to the ball, but the refs screwed up that. Yeah, when I hear Miami fans complain about the 03 Fiesta Bowl and say that, the refs screwed it up, I agree. I say, Ohio State could have run out the clock, and we could have had a national champion crowned like 45 minutes earlier without all the overtimes. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
This is Anthony. Actually, for me, the most disputed national championship as a Hurricanes fan would be the Miami Florida State thing. Remember,
that year, I can't remember what year it was, where Miami had beat them the year before, yet Florida State got into the national championship, even though we blew them out that year. That for me would be the most disputed national championship for me as a Hurricanes fan. Don't you agree that the NCAA screwed the Hurricanes out of that national championship?
Yeah, so that is certainly understandable, and we discussed that on the Miami show last week because that was brought up. There's two things I'd like to point out, though, Anthony, and certainly Miami was most likely the best team in the country that year, just judging based on the talent and the way they played on the field. But let's keep a couple things in mind. First of all, the Florida State game was not a blowout. That was a great game. I remember it well, and now I'm looking up the score because I thought I had the score in my head. That was a 27-24 game at the Orange Bowl. So you played that at home, and that was a down-to-the-wire game. So you didn't blow out Florida State. But still, to your credit...
Oh, no, my mistake. Even though we beat them earlier that year, yet did we get screwed because was that the same year we got blown out by... Was that the same year that we got blown out by UCLA? 2 weeks before Florida State?
No. You guys beat UCLA. Are you talking about 1998? You're going back a few years. So 2001, 2000, the game you lost was at Washington. So that's your other issue, Anthony, is that Washington went 10-1, so they only had one loss as well. So you both went 10-1, and Washington won the game head-to-head. So Washington, in my view, actually should have played in the BCS championship game.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think Miami should have played it, even though we lost against them. Shouldn't Miami have been going against them to have a rematch from earlier that season?
No, Oklahoma was undefeated.
Oh, Oklahoma was undefeated that year?
Yeah, they won the national championship.
Okay. So in a sense, so you're saying that the NCAA really didn't screw with that title specifically?
Oh, sure they did.
Screwed by the NCAA.
Sure they did. Well, when you say the NCAA, it's the BCS formula. It was a combination of computers.
Yeah, the BCS.
Yeah, the computers, the combination of the computers and the voters. There was a combination 2/3 versus 1/3 formula there. So what I'm saying is that I understand the Miami fans' gripe about that season. Absolutely. Their rival got to play in the national championship. And this happened repeatedly in the BCS where two teams actually played in this during the season, and the BCS still chose the team that lost the game, which is crazy. So I definitely back up your argument there that Florida State was the team that certainly did not earn the spot in the championship game, and Miami earned it more than Florida State. They beat them head-to-head. But we also have to consider Washington had the same record as Miami, and they beat Miami.
So would you say the same thing about Ohio State this year, that they didn't play enough games to qualify? So can you use that same concept for Ohio State this year, where they didn't play enough games to even deserve to be in the national championship game?
Well, that's a whole different argument. This situation, everybody played the same number of games, and you actually had teams playing against each other, Florida State, Miami, and Miami, Washington, to where you could make a judgment about who should have played in the championship game. If you're talking about this year, I respect the argument and perspective that Ohio State did not play enough games. For anybody who says that, I can agree with them in regards to, I don't agree with them. I can understand their viewpoint. And I think it's logical. I think it's reasonable. But I also want those people to define for me how many games should have been played and why that's the magic number. For me,
the magic,
just to finish
my magic number for Ohio State.
Anthony, just to finish my
magic number
point.
would have been 10 to 12 games, maybe.
10 to 12.
10 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Before,
All right. So the situation here, though, is that if that's your magic number, 10 games, I don't know why it's 10 games, but anyway, because, for example, Jimbo Fisher was complaining that Ohio State was selected for the playoff and his team was not, because Ohio State, did not play enough games. Well, his team played 2 less games than the other teams that played in the playoff. So why wouldn't we be able to say the same thing to him? You didn't play 2 games. You played 2 less games than the teams that made the playoff. Therefore, why are you looking down on a team that played 3 less games than you did?
I think the reason why I understand the reason why Jimbo said that is because I think, in a sense, the competition in the SEC was a little bit better in general or overall during the year compared to, let's say, there wasn't a lot of top 10 teams. I guess he was saying because of strength of schedule for him, because he had a better strength of schedule during the season because he played a whole bunch of teams in the SEC compared to the Big Ten, where they didn't have any top throughout the year. How many teams were in the top 10 in the top 25 for the Big Ten compared to the SEC?
How is the top 10?
I think his argument.
How is the top 10 determined?
By the playoff committee.
Yeah. The top 10 and the rankings, the 25, is determined by people. Okay. The results, what were the results on the field? What was the record for all the SEC teams that played each other? What was their record? If you added up the entire...
Florida and Georgia were over 500. They had 10 wins this year, 9 to 10 wins. I think Alabama was the best team in the conference, but I think in general they had more teams above 500 compared to the Big Ten.
You sure about that?
I believe so. I thought.
Okay. Here's the point I'm making. I'm going to make 2 points. One would be that I'll answer my own question just because maybe I'm not explaining it well enough. That the point is there were no non-conference games played. Therefore, every conference, especially the Big Ten and the SEC in particular, the record for the entire conference was exactly the same. The Big Ten had the same record as the SEC did during the regular season. So Jimbo Fisher's argument that the SEC was better than the Big Ten, he might be right, but it's not based on facts. It's not based on results during the regular season on the field, because if you added up every team's record in the Big Ten and you added up every team's record in the SEC, they were exactly 500. And actually, if you added up Ohio State's schedule versus Texas A&M's schedule, Ohio State played a tougher winning percentage than Texas A&M did.
Oh, so you're saying Jimbo's argument is a non-starter, is what it is. It's because of the overall conference schedule and Ohio State's schedule against 500 teams was better, is what you're saying. Like, so Jimbo doesn't really have a right to say that Ohio State didn't deserve because they had a better overall record when it came to 500 teams, over 500 teams and stuff, like teams with winning records and stuff. You know what you're saying?
I'm saying that logically, Jimbo Fisher didn't have an argument because I just laid it out why he didn't. Now, if he just wants to flat out state, which he did in a sense, that the SEC is so good that we played such a tough schedule, and that's his argument, that's fine. But if you look at it logically, he didn't have much of a gripe.
And back to the argument with the disputed national championships. Did you like when they used to have the BCS to determine did you like the co-national championship, or that was so, in a sense, you didn't like that idea because when it came to that type of thing, because I remember there was a whole bunch of, I looked at the record of the BCS when it came to determining national championships. Sometimes the co-national champion didn't really deserve the national champion. It should have been one team winning that championship. So do you think the BCS was screwed, had a lot of flaws when it came to having these co-national championships every once in a while, like maybe 2 out of the, like 25% of the BCS champions during that era were co-national champions. Do you think that affected the credibility of the BCS in general because of that whole co-national championship stupidity that they had?
Well, you've answered your own question. Yeah, it's stupidity. So first of all, just the term champion denotes what? The term champion denotes that there's one. There's a team, a person who is the champion. Actually, the term co-champion is kind of an oxymoron in and of itself. So should there be co-champions? Well, of course not. It basically tells us that these two entities should be playing. Are there co-Super Bowl champions? Are there co-World Series champions? Is there a co-heavyweight boxing champion?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, there's people with different belts sanctioned by different associations, but
yeah, like I said, in a way, I think that's what screwed up. That's why people were calling the BCS for the season that, because they had an inconsistency with all these co-national co-championships every other season or something like that. Because did Miami have to share a national championship with a team during the 80s or something like that? Did they share with like Penn State or someone during the 80s or 90s when they won a championship?
Miami,
in the 90s?
91 with Washington.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. In a sense, you think that affected the credibility of the BCS. That's why a whole bunch of college football, even the traditionalists, were calling for the elimination of it. In general, when it came to the BCS, that's why fans wanted to switch to the college football playoff system, which is, in essence, still has its flaws, but it's a little bit more improved. Do you think that's the reason why, in general, fans call for the elimination of the BCS, because a whole bunch of co-national champions throughout the history of the BCS?
Well, I think that fans and media and other people debated and clamored for a college football playoff during the BCS era for the same reason that people are now clamoring for an expanded playoff, because they see teams repeatedly that are left out that have earned it just as much as the teams that are included. And especially in the BCS era, we had umpteen examples. Most years, there was a team left out or teams left out that had just as much of a right to play in the championship game as the teams that were playing.
Yeah, in a sense, I was too young to remember the prime years of the BCS when it was a little bit more fleshed out. Like when it came to the early years, was there more of a definitive, like when it came to back in the 80s or 90s during the BCS era and stuff like that? Did they actually have a better way of choosing the national championship, or the AP was the one that chose the national championship before the BCS came in? Stuff like that.
The BCS started in 1998.
Oh, so every other national championship, there was actually, the AP was the one that chose the national championships every year, stuff like that.
The AP chose its national champion every year, and USA Today chose its, and UPI chose its, and there's a zillion polls out there that chose their own national champion. So in essence, there was no the national champion. There were a bunch of national champions. So
it was back to that. It would be actually harder. Fans would actually have more complaints because each press company like the USA Today or ESPN would have their own rankings, and the person on top, it would have to be consistent across the board to determine who was the national championship. If it was like that today,
I had less debate with it because I didn't necessarily agree with the AP or the UPI or whomever it was, but at least it wasn't a farce. At least it was true to what it was. It was a vote, and everybody recognized it's a vote. That's what it is. It's not pretending to be something it's not. We don't have an objective playoff right now. Some people think it's objective, but of course it's not objective. It's invitational. It's a golf tournament. Teams get invited to the playoff.
These college football playoffs, sometimes it's done on popularity, on what teams can make the most money for the NCAA. Don't you agree? Sometimes it's not about the best team. Sometimes they choose it based on who can make the most money. Let's say a team like Miami had a better record than hypothetically the year that let's say a team like Miami had the same record as a team like LSU the year that they won the national championship, and they were going against a team like Clemson or something like that. They choose a SEC team because it makes more money for the NCAA. Don't you think? In a sense, it has to do with money and eyes on the game, because no one would watch the game if Miami was playing. In a sense, because they're not a national power.
Okay, a lot of people make that claim, but that's actually not a criticism I have of the system. I have not seen any evidence or decisions within the 7 years of the playoff in which a team was selected because I thought that the committee determined that they would be better for TV ratings. I haven't seen that. I just see a bad system. I don't see. Again,
you don't see evidence of them. You don't see evidence of what I'm talking about, where they're choosing based on
not really
money projections or ratings projections for the game.
So in the very
first,
the
NFL does.
Like the NFL does? What's the NFL choosing? Yeah. The NFL doesn't choose anything. The teams play on the field, and the best teams go to the playoffs. The NFL is not choosing anything. Professional sports don't choose anything. They sometimes don't get the matchups that they want, but that's the way it played out on the field. What's the NFL choosing that creates?
No, how they planned it. When I'm talking about the Super Bowl, because honestly, I don't think the Bucs were the best team in the NFC. What I'm saying is the Bucs, I think, got lucky in a sense because there was a whole bunch of missed calls throughout their games against the Packers and the Saints that they got away with. The NFL wanted to prove that Brady could win the Super Bowl
That's a whole other matter. So, Anthony, you're telling us now that the games in the NFL are rigged. They're fixed.
Yeah, in a sense, by the commissioner, not the referees or anything like that.
Oh, the commissioner. Well, the commissioner's not on the field calling the game. So the officials have to, if what I'm hearing is your viewpoint, the officials have to be in on that because they have to rig the game. They have to fix the game. The commissioner can't do that from the press box, from his luxury suite. What he wants, if what you're saying is correct, if the commissioner wants certain teams to be winning NFL playoff games, he can only send the order out. It has to be executed. So the officials do have to fix the game.
Yes, in a sense, that's what I'm saying. Like there has to be. It's suspicious that Tom Brady, who didn't have the best team in the league, was able to win a championship when you saw a whole bunch of pass interference calls missed, a whole bunch of holding calls missed against the Bucs when they were facing teams like the Chiefs, the Chiefs, the Packers, and the Saints and stuff like that. So in a sense, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Do you think that's ever happened? Do you think there was ever something like in that egregious in college football where you see referees are purposely missing calls to favor a certain team and stuff like that?
Well, I would first have to agree with you on the first point. And I'm certainly not beyond thinking that there are conspiracy theories that are true, that are actuality in this country concerning a lot of things. But when it comes to the NFL, I'm not seeing where they're fixing games to get the most popular people and teams in games. Yes, Tom Brady made it to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl this year, but there are miles of examples of the lesser favorable matchups being of those teams winning to get to Super Bowls in the NFL. So first of all, I'm saying that I don't agree with your first premise about the NFL being fixed. Although if that came out tomorrow, I would not be the most shocked person in the world that the NFL's fixed or anything's fixed. But if I seen that in college football, well, I don't think that
where it was that egregious where the referees were where the NCAA were favoring a certain team to win a national championship, and they were not purposely fixing, unknowingly doing something like that, where they were not telling the refs to do it, but in a sense they were catering towards a certain team to win the national championship, where there was such egregious missed calls during the season or during the national championship or during the championship games in the conferences and stuff like that. That's why I'm wondering, has there ever been a case like that?
Well, there have been egregious
during a season?
There have been egregious calls during seasons that have resulted in teams winning big games and getting themselves in position to win national championships, but they didn't involve teams where it was obvious that this team is some favored team. They're Notre Dame or Alabama,
or like Ohio State, or like an Ohio State or a Michigan or something like that.
I'll give you the most egregious situation that resulted in a team winning a national championship. I don't think this can be really disputed by much. Colorado lost a game and they tied a game, and they still were awarded the national championship in 1990. And Colorado, in addition to losing a game and tying a game, were given a fifth down. I don't know if you've heard this story. They were given a fifth down against Missouri.
I've heard other channels talk about that, the fifth down situation where the referees gave them a down after the clock was run out.
Yeah. I posted a video about this. So anyway, there was a fourth down play. Colorado didn't make the first down, but they gave them another fourth down. The official forgot to flip the card at the top of the yard marker, and they were given another, and they scored. So that is a situation in which there is no doubt, there's no debating, disclaiming, arguing in any way that Colorado would not have won that game without being given an extra play. Well, without that win, they would not have played for the national championship and won a share of the national championship. And
actually an egregious play for me as a Hurricanes fan, like you said, the phantom pass interference call that should have never been called against. I think it was Benny Blades or one of the Miami corners, like Sam Shields or Benny Blades, where the receiver for Ohio State complained that he was being pushed off when there was no evidence of a pass interference or a holding call.
Yeah, Benny Blades had been in the NFL for about 10 years at that point. But so it wasn't Benny Blades for sure. So again.
Was it Sam Shields then? Was it Sam Shields or like Ed Reed or someone?
No, it was not Ed Reed. I think Ed Reed was gone about a year or two earlier. But anyway, it was not a famous player. It was not. Some Miami fan would be able to fill us in on who that was.
I think it was Mike Rump. It was Mike Rump.
No, I don't think it was Mike Rump either. I'm going to look it up right now. But regardless of who it was, I don't think it was a player of that status. regardless of who it was, my perspective on that play was that pass interference was the wrong call. The right call on the play would have been holding, that there was a hold on the receiver before the ball was thrown, and that
or illegal contact.
the result would have been pretty much the same. It would have been an automatic first down. I know that there were other bad calls in that game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Do you think you've never seen an egregious call where you think the referees are favoring a certain team, where the referees are choosing because they want the other team to lose? Like, in a sense, they wanted a blue blood, white collar program like in Ohio State over in Miami, who was like trash talking all the time, or like being overly like doing all that stuff on the field. Do you think in the back of the referee's mind they did that to stick it to Miami, where they didn't want a team like Miami, who was basically a black mark on in a sense, a black mark on the NCAA and stuff like that, where they didn't want a team like that to win the championship. They wanted a blue-collar program like Ohio State to win it and stuff like that.
I'm watching the play right now. Get his arms wrapped around the receiver while the ball's in the air. Anyway, no, I don't see any evidence of that. I see the history of sports. Any sport is littered, especially before replay, with bad calls. But nobody can. I would need somebody to come on here and give me a point by point by point that would lead us to a place where, okay, this game showed us that obviously this officiating crew was setting this team up, boom, 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 and wanting this team to win. I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, and another pro example is the immaculate reception during the Steelers' dominance in the late 70s.
Okay.
That wasn't a reception.
Okay. Let's understand something, Anthony. At the time that the immaculate reception occurred, the Steelers were not the Steelers. They were not the late 70s. That happened in 1972, and the Steelers had never won a playoff game in their history. So the Steelers were not favored by the NFL in any such way at that point. The Steelers had never won a playoff game in the history of the franchise.
Oh, okay. I always thought that immaculate reception happened during the late 70s when they were dominating it.
No, 1972 against the Oakland Raiders. Yeah, they were down 7-6, and yes, they won the game.
Thank you for answering my questions, Mark, and have a good day.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. What we like to do here. Let's get these things cleared up, right? Man, the more the NFL gets brought up here, the more I'm wanting to start an NFL channel. I want to clone myself.
The call will start at the beep.
Hello, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is FSU Gnome.
Hey, how's it going, FSU Gnome? Good. Thanks for calling. What's up?
My dog's barking. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I've been watching your show lately, and I got a couple bullet points that I wrote down, and I'm not sure if this has already been done, but I came up with a metric called revolving relevancy.
Oh, okay.
And we can debate over the timeline of how far back you go, but I came up with 20 years. I thought 10 years was not enough.
Okay.
And 25, maybe a little too much. So,
okay.
And that's about the average age of a college athlete, which is 20 years old. So, I mean, you can debate 19, 18, 21, but I just give a nice round number of 20 years.
Sure.
So, in a perfect world, we would have the correct playoff system so we could get the best metrics. But my thought is, if we could go back the last 20 years and have whoever's in the college playoffs 1 point, gets 1 point. If you go to the semifinals, you earn 2 points. If you win, you earn 3 points.
Okay.
And as time rolls around the next year, the last year, the first year that happened, all those points fall off.
Sure.
So you would have these tiers. Let's say it was 30 points for the top tier, 29 to 25 for the next tier, whatever you come up with. That would, how relevant you are in the college world is how good you do.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that would kind of correlate to. It would be interesting to see those numbers correlate to recruiting, and to the zeitgeist of college football, of coaching jobs.
Okay.
I bet that correlates interesting in some ways. And that was the kind of metric I came up with, and I see what you thought about it.
So for anybody who did not reach the college football playoff, it doesn't matter if you went 3-9 or you went 11-1, whatever your record, it makes absolutely no difference. You had to make the playoff to have any kind of relevance that season.
Yes.
So that's the first issue I've got with your system. I think your system is interesting. I think it can show, it's going to show which teams are relevant based on the college football playoff selection committee, based on what they think.
It's a long 20-year period.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we'd have to go from, so it's a 2020, so we'd have to go 01 through 20. That would be our current span of time. And we'd have to fill in the blanks on who made the playoff or who would have made the playoff under this selection committee. So your guess is as good as mine. Who would have made the playoff during, most of that time that you're evaluating. But again, I do think that there are teams that are left out of the playoff every year that are just as relevant, just as good, and have just as good a resumes as the teams that make the playoff every year.
I agree. And like I said, in a perfect world, we maybe have 8 teams, and then all Power 5s have a bid. Just the correct way, have an automatic bid, and then the other teams have qualifiers too. And then that would show it's just a relevancy, metric. And they drop off, kind of like the way soccer does in Europe. Your points would drop off the first year.
Sure.
If you don't do anything, you're just kind of less relevant in the college world.
So whether it's because of success on the field or name brand, I'm thinking of a few schools that have yet to reach the college football playoff. One that comes to mind that's been successful during the 7 years, going to New Year's 6 games, finishing in the top 10 3 out of 4 years, is Penn State. But Penn State would have 0, just like Rutgers would have 0.
Within the last 20 years, that Penn State would have made the playoffs or would have won?
They would have made the playoff in 05. Yeah, if you're going to go back 20 years. Points. But just looking at the last 7 years, if we just did it for the last 7 years, you're saying that Penn State's just as relevant as Rutgers. You're not distinguishing anything between those two. None. 0.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. I'm not
saying if the playoff needs to be bigger,
I'm not picking it apart. But, Florida State, and during the playoff era, Florida State made the, that's right, they made the first playoff. So I'm thinking of Penn State, I'm thinking of USC, and I'm thinking of Texas. So, again, their relevancy is 0, at least in the playoff era, just like Vanderbilt.
Not much. They're just not. They're getting better. They're just not been relevant. You feel like you're a main program, and they can come back on but they just don't have any points.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you consider relevant. You know, we'd have to define that, but that means different things to different people. By some people's measurement, the likes of USC and Texas will always be relevant because they're brands and they have history and prestige and all that. You're looking more at the product on the field, and to your point, Miami's not won anything or done anything basically since 2002 was the last time that they had a major impact on the national, or really any impact on the national championship race. They've not won a conference championship in the entire, 17 years in the ACC. And largely since 2005, they've been like a 55% winning percentage program. Yeah, but some people would argue that Miami's relevant because of their history and because of their cachet and because of their, I guess, popularity. I can't measure their popularity. I don't know. But a lot of people would say that they're still a popular program in comparison to others that are more successful on the field. That Miami's more popular, therefore more relevant. So, but yours is all about on the field, which is great.
Right.
Although, again, if I was going to do it, the teams making the playoffs would have nothing to do with, because I just think the playoffs are a farce. So the teams,
sure, they're hand-picked at the moment, but it kind of doesn't matter because what the committee selects makes those teams more popular. They have a product on the field. You need to see more TV about them. Their relevancy is higher because they are picked. So that's all this metric does. Now, yes, in a perfect world, we'd have a better playoff system. But even if the committee does pick them, they are more relevant because they have more exposure.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to misconstrue it. Obviously, the teams that make the playoff, the committee is not just haphazardly picking teams. They're not selecting teams that went 7-5 and 8-4. Those are generally the teams that most people agree are the best teams. That they proved it during the season. They're undefeated teams and one-loss teams. There's never been a 2-loss team reach the playoff. So what the committee's doing is not that it's not logical or that those teams haven't proven to some degree to be amongst the best teams. It's just teams get left out that have just as good a resume as some of the teams that get placed in the playoff. See, my relevancy, if you're just going to talk about what happened on the field, FSU over the last 20 years, I would have 3 columns. I would just go, here's your winning percentage, 1 through 20. Here's your conference championships, 1 through 20. And here are your national championships with a bunch of disclaimers next to it, a bunch of notes to disclaim. And maybe major bowl wins or something like that, some type of postseason or maybe record against a non-conference competition, I think is relevant. No. Did you put this together? Did you add it up?
I have not. This was just a first draft that I've been kicking around since I've been watching your videos about the coaching hires. There's a lot of your videos about tiers of schools, and I was thinking this is a way to maybe quantify their actual on-field accolades, basically.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of notes here of all sorts of videos I'm about to produce because I've been wanting to, ever since the national championship game, to release a way too early top 25, and I've got all sorts of notes for that. And people that love these type of discussions should love tomorrow night's topic. Tomorrow night's topic will be really good. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more of this. Yes. So I like your metric. I'm not criticizing. I'm not. I'm just giving you a different perspective on it.
Sure. Well, that's all I had. I just had to come up with this, and me the idea, and it needs to be perfected, and probably someone much more smart than me. But I thought it was interesting that the data could be interesting when you correlate it with all the other metrics and all the other thought experiments that everyone has.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Thanks for the call.
Your time.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Appreciate that.
All right, go now.
Okay, good stuff there. So that's compiling a metric of relevancy. It's all based on the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, though. That's my issue. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark Rogers. It's Ballard Sports Media. How you doing today?
Hey, Ballard. I'm good. What's going on?
Yes, sir. Not much. I noticed the topic is disputed. I guess like debatable, like championships, and obviously there's been quite a few in college football's history. And I haven't really been listening to the whole show today, so I don't know if anyone's brought this one up. But what about 1979, the goal line stand with Penn State and Bama?
Yes. So in 1979, I remember it well. Yes, there was a great goal line stand in which Penn State was going in for the tying score against Alabama at the Sugar Bowl. Alabama, great goal line stand against the likes of Matt Suey and who later played for the Bears, and can't think of the other guy's first name, Gooman. And Chuck Fusina was the Penn State quarterback. Anyway, Alabama won the game. They won the national championship 14-7. Meanwhile, in the Rose Bowl, USC, they had tied a game, I believe, to Stanford. I think it was 21-all. Sometime mid-season, and they played the number one team in the country, Ohio State, and won 17-16 on a last-minute touchdown drive, Charles White over the top, and USC beat Ohio State 17-16. Alabama, I believe, was voted number one in both polls, I believe. Because the year before, Alabama and USC split the national championship. But in 79, Alabama was undefeated with no ties, and USC had a tie, so Alabama won the national title, although a lot of people thought USC was the best team in the country. And I think from a talent perspective, I think it's pretty easy to see since that game that if you look at USC's roster, they were loaded with NFL players, with Hall of Fame players.
Absolutely.
I can think of three.
But I bring that game up. I mean, I got family members that are Penn State fans, and my grandmother watches my channel and everything. And we've talked about some games before, and I joke about her or joke with her about that game, and I'm like, hey, did he cross the goal line yet? And she made a statement to me one time and said, if they had, because they didn't have instant replay back then. I mean, they showed what happened, but you know how today you'll see the refs review a play with all the technology that they have now, and they didn't really have that back then to really get a true good look of it. And I'm going to be honest, I saw it on YouTube the other day.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at it and I said, he just barely broke the plane. And I don't know, was it back then the same as it is now where the tip of the ball has to cross the plane, or was it a little different?
That is a great question there. That is a great question because I don't remember that being talked about back then like it is now. And the NFL and the college football rules are similar today, but that hasn't always been the case. That is a great question in regards to, because I don't want to, I'm almost positive Barry Krause, was your linebacker who made the big play. Anyway, I don't want to answer that for sure. I believe it was, but there might not have been forward progress.
You got to think of that too, because
it was pushed back. And if the whistle wasn't blown. Looking at it, and I haven't watched this play in forever.
Yeah, it's one of the most well-known and famous plays. I mean, if you ask Alabama fans about it, or really just any college football fan, I mean, that was the two of the best coaches at the time. This was Paterno at Penn State, and it was Bear Bryant at Alabama.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Two well-known, very talented head coaches, and I mean, I mentioned my grandmother who told me about this. She's a big diehard Penn State fan, and she was talking with me about it a little bit over Christmas or whatever, and she's like, if we had instant replay, they would have found out that he crossed the line. And I'm like, and I've gone back and looked at it, and I'm an Alabama fan. And I kind of noticed it, and it does look like it a little bit, and I've got to give Penn State some credit there. Maybe it did break the plane, but will we ever know? I don't know.
So I'm looking through an article right now, and I'm seeing all these names I remember because, like I say, Ballard, I'm an old guy. I watched the game. But you bring up an interesting point about the rules. What were the rules then versus what they are now? And I don't remember when rules changed. I know that when I first started watching football, there was no forward progress. If somebody wanted to sling somebody 3 yards back, then, hey, where their rear end landed on the field, that's where they landed. That's where they were tackled. Man, that's a fascinating point about the rules. Because maybe it was less controversial because you could, in fact, although I got to think, see, we put it in the context of 22 players smashed together at the goal line. But let's say a player's just running.
Making a huge ball. I mean,
let's say a player's just running down the field and they somehow they're just running. They cross the goal line, even back then. And the ball tips the goal line, and then all of a sudden somebody grabs them and throws them back. I think it was still the plane at the goal line. I still think that was the rule then. But that would be a great point. Maybe somebody's got the answer for us because I'm not finding that. I'm finding articles that are just miles long with what happened to these players and all of that business, but the rules portion of it's certainly an interesting one.
Yeah, and I do these. So one of the series of videos that I do on my channel, I call it College Football Flashbacks, where I pick an old college football game and I review it. I look at it, what happened, what happened different. This is definitely one on my list to do. And it's gonna be fun to talk about because I was kind of thinking just now. I remember a play a couple years ago in the Clemson-Bama championship game with Deshaun Watson won it. There was a particular play I think where he kind of jumped out of bounds, right? But he had the ball. I think he went out of bounds on the right side of the plane.
Yeah.
If you were to look at it, he has the ball in his left hand, and it breaks the plane. I mean, that's.
Who had the ball?
Deshaun Watson. I don't know if you remember the play where he ran away from defenders and something. But I mean, there's just that's always interesting to see in college football. Really, in the NFL too. I mean, it's like his whole body doesn't have to be in the end zone, but if the ball can break the plane, it's pretty much a touchdown. And they say, it doesn't have to be the whole ball either. I mean, I hear Gary Danielson talk about it on some plays. It's like, if it's just the tip of the football, that just a little bit of the football needs to get past that line.
It just needs to touch the line, technically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just right on.
Well, I think in Alabama's defense, not that they couldn't have lost the game, but that touchdown would not have won the game. It would have tied the game.
Right. Yeah. And given Penn State a chance, definitely. So I mean, it didn't. It wasn't so much like I don't think Penn State fans look at that and say that cost us the game, but they look at it and say, hey, had they had called that, then we definitely would have very much still been alive. I think. I mean, it was, but I mean that's one of the most entertaining bowl games from back in the 70s. One of the most controversial calls and plays, and I mean it's very interesting. I'll have to go back and probably find the full game on YouTube or something and watch it and review it and everything and put something together to maybe do a video on it or whatever.
Yeah, somebody for Alabama, I'm watching it right now. Somebody for Alabama made, and I'm remembering a lot of this again, made a really good tackle. Penn State had the ball about the 12-yard line, and they threw a sprint right pass, and the wide receiver was right at the half-yard line, turning upfield, and he just got driven right out of bounds right at the half-yard line.
Yeah, and this is the goal line stand game you're watching right now, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's there's just been so many controversial calls, and whether it's a meaningless regular season game or a bowl game or a championship like this that have just, it's left some fans kind of pissed off about it, and some fans are happy about the call, obviously. I mean, it kind of, if it upsets one fan base, the other fan base is happy about it. But anyway, I just wanted to call in. Obviously, I assumed you heard of the game, but I didn't, I wanted to hear your thoughts on all of that. But I mean, I've heard, like my grandmother, a Penn State fan, say if instant replay had gotten involved, if we had that back then, like we do now, I mean, who knows what would have happened? Maybe Penn State does. I mean, even if there's still time left for Bama in that game. So, but.
Yeah, they might have tied the game. It might have been a tie game. And as you well know, there were ties back then. So they would not have played overtime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyway, thanks for taking my call, Mark. Have a great day. And roll time.
Thanks, Ballard. So yeah, I when he said it was controversial, I was going to the vote aspect of that because I well remember that many people thought USC was the best team in the country, me included. They were just, my goodness. And you shouldn't vote or determine a championship based on talent to say, oh, this team's more talented, because that was proven out later. NFL scouts could tell you at the time USC is the most talented team in the country. But my goodness, woo. Marcus Allen, Charles White, Anthony Munoz, Ronnie Lott, Joey Browner, Clay Matthews, Chip Banks. That team was like all-time loaded. Eric Hicks, or either Eric Wright or Dwight Hicks, one of the other two that went to the 49ers. Yeah. Got the fifth down game. We got Texas A&M fan in here a lot, which is good. Good to hear from our Texas A&M folks that they maybe found us because we're covering a lot of Texas A&M football, and we've got the Aggies a rundown on their 2021 class. We just ran down the 22 targets and commits for 21. And we're going to run through 2021 here in a couple days. That's actually going to be posted tomorrow, I believe. David is telling us that 1990 Colorado played a difficult schedule. Well, regardless, they lost 2 games and tied 1. That's far from national championship caliber play, especially since they could have lost. What makes it even worse is that they won the Orange Bowl 10-9, and there was a last-minute punt return by Rocket Ismail that would have won the game. And even that call was questionable that brought that touchdown back. Colorado would have lost. Here's a team that, quote unquote, won the national championship that basically lost 3 games and tied 1. So that's pretty awful. And so I've already torn that season to shreds, and that one's out there. So you can check out that video, the 1990 season. Yes, I'm too kind to the callers. So remember that next time you call me, that I may not be kind anymore. Yes, Glenn Sharp. I keep forgetting that name. Chuck C. Glenn Sharp. Absolutely. The Immaculate Reception. That was a good one. All right, good stuff. All right, it's always entertaining. Oh man, my man Brent's in the chat, or at least he was at one point. Yeah, Brent. Yeah, I still got it. 1972. Brent's a buddy of mine, and Brent. I should have posted the call-in number. I failed to do that, but I think I did fail to do that. So my buddy Brent, I told him one time that I could list every score in the history of the NFL playoffs, which I could at one point. The last 10 years, it's gone. But yeah, at one point, all the NFL playoff scores in history, knew them all. Anyway, that's not to be applauded. That's actually a waste of brain cells. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Rod. Mark, how you doing today?
Hey, Rod. I'm good. What's up?
Good. Oh, so I don't know if you saw one of the comments I made on there. This is a national championship scenario I didn't really know too much about. I mean, I don't really remember too much about. But the '96 year, when there was pretty much a rematch between Florida and Florida State.
Sure.
So when I brought that up, David Greenshield made a really good comment. Something I never really thought about was, should Ohio State get some consideration for at least get some votes for the national title that year, even though they lost to Michigan?
Sure.
Because they won that big game in the Rose Bowl, and winning the Rose Bowl kind of helped Florida win the national title. So
it did.
I don't know. Can you kind of break that down? I don't really remember how that went. Broke that down. Like, how was there a rematch?
Yeah, so basically what happened there was, so it's 1996, Florida State played the last game of the season, as they always do, and Florida State beat Florida. I'm almost positive the score was 24-17. They sacked Danny Werfel about 8 times, just a dominant defensive effort. Meanwhile, on the same day, Ohio State's losing to Michigan at the Horseshoe 13-9. Ty Streets with the only touchdown of the game. Sean Springs slips down. The Buckeyes blow a 9-0 lead. They lose. They were consensus number 1 going into that game, undefeated. So they lose. And so Arizona State, at that point, winning the Pac-12, was the only undefeated team in the nation at 10-0, 11-0. Pardon me?
Florida State wasn't undefeated?
I'm sorry, Florida State as well. So you had a situation, I don't know what the rankings were going into, but of course everybody was locked into their bowl game. So the SEC champ went to the Sugar, and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten to the Rose. So that matched up Ohio State and Arizona State. I believe the Buckeyes dropped all the way to 5 after that loss to Michigan, who was, I think, 17th in the country going into that game. So it's not a good,
21st.
Not a great loss.
No, you're right. Sorry. Go ahead.
So not a great loss, not a great loss for Ohio State from that standpoint in comparison to the Florida State game. So Florida won the national championship. I say that in quotes based on the voting. because they were afforded the opportunity to amend their loss, and they won decidedly. I think the score was 52-21 in the Sugar Bowl over Florida State, where Ohio State needed the last second Jermaine to David Boston touchdown pass to win the Rose Bowl 20-17. Otherwise, Arizona State would have won the national championship. They were the only undefeated team, or would have been the only one left standing. So it was just a combination of Florida getting to avenge its loss, and they won by 4 to 5 scores.
Okay. Okay, that's how I somewhat remembered it, but I just remember there was some chaos and confusion going on there because, again, it was toward the end of the it was getting ready to be the BCS era, I guess you could say, and it's those types of scenarios because Ohio State is such a great team that year, 96, and I think another thing that hurt them, too, from probably preventing them from getting those votes was there was still that stigma that regardless how good we were, we just couldn't beat Michigan. So I'm sure there was that stigma kind of hanging over with the voters as well that kind of prevented us from getting any votes. Because that was such a great team. Even though 95 the year before was a great team too, that was probably still my favorite team. But I think that year, even if they did beat Michigan, they probably still wouldn't have got any votes for the national championship because 95 Nebraska was just too good of a historic team to not get the votes. So that's all I really had. I just wanted to clear up 96, kind of stay on topic here, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Rod. Appreciate it. Yeah, so it's a situation in which the judgment call was made because you get the win in the rematch game, Florida State, and you get a better win in terms of the point spread versus Ohio State winning a close game. Florida won a blowout. But in terms of looking at two teams that played in great conferences against great competition, and it was definitely an argument at that point. If you look at the stretch of the mid-'90s into the late '90s, there was no SEC dominance, clear dominance over the rest of the nation. The Big Ten had gripes, had a argument, had a point, certainly as a claim as the best conference in America during much of that time in the mid to late '90s, and performed in bowl games. Penn State performed, Michigan performed, Ohio State performed for the most point. That if you just looked at schedules and records, the national title should have been split in '96. That would have been the most fair way to approach it, just like in '97 and in '91 and what should have been '94. So again, the voting is another flawed process in which sometimes the voters would determine this should be a split process because the teams didn't play. And if you match up the resumes, they're very similar. In other years, it was just went all one-sided. And in this case, against Ohio State in the Big Ten, and in '94 against Penn State in the Big Ten. Yeah, the '95 scenario would have been interesting because Ohio State was undefeated. They had a ton of stars on the team, and of course, the Heisman Trophy winner. Had they beaten Michigan, they would have been 11-0. Gone to the Rose Bowl to play a USC team that was 8-2-1. That beat Northwestern, who went to the Rose Bowl, but that would have been a great matchup. Keyshawn Johnson, USC, again, 8-2-1, like a fringe top 10 team, number 10 or 11 in the nation, taking on an Ohio State team that was 11-0 versus Nebraska that mauled Florida, trounced them 62-24, I think was the final in the Lawrence Phillips / Tommy Frazier game. That was a close game, like mid-second quarter. Nebraska didn't come out and boom, 21-0 in the first quarter. It was a close game. They traded some scores. It was like 14-all, something in that range, and then Nebraska just took them out in the second quarter. But Nebraska, as Rod pointed out, most likely because of their dominance would have received the votes. But again, it would have been fair had Ohio State gone undefeated, Nebraska undefeated, both playing killer schedules, Rose Bowl win against USC versus a Fiesta Bowl win against Florida, split national championship. But of course, the Buckeyes blew it against Tim Biakabatuka and his 313 yards. All right, so Nath Bone, your point is well taken to a certain extent that the Big Ten is about one team, the ACC is about one team, the Big 12 is about one team. We know who they are. That the SEC is about 3 to 4 teams. Now, the only thing in your statement there that's not entirely correct is the every year statement. Okay? Because if you want to see every year and you want to say that the Big Ten, if you're just talking about who wins the championship, we're looking at the playoff era, you're right. The Big Ten has basically been dominated by Ohio State. They've won 4 consecutive times, and the other years they were considered, looked at as the best team, Oklahoma, Clemson. Okay. Where it's more shared in the SEC with LSU jumping in there and Georgia, LSU and Georgia, breaking up Bama's dominance. But if you want to talk about which conference has been 3 or 4 deep, the Big Ten can make as much of a claim for that as the SEC in previous seasons. Penn State's been a top 10 team 3 out of 4 years. Michigan's been in the top 10 a few times under Jim Harbaugh. Michigan State, between 2010 and 2015, was going to, in winning Rose Bowls, Cotton Bowls, finishing in the top 5 in the nation. And Iowa has a top 5 finish, etc. So the Big Ten has been able to, if you go to year over the last 10 years, you can see where the Big Ten has posted 10-3, 11-2 teams to supplement or provide that second tier that the ACC has not had, in particular since Florida State fell off the rails, where it's not just the SEC. Right this second, it looks like that because Penn State, Michigan gave us bad years, but maybe those second-tier teams are Iowa, Northwestern, and somebody else, Indiana. We got to see this year play out. But I will agree with the majority of that comment outside of that. The college athletics show, is Pitt better than Penn State? They might be this year. It was certainly a toss-up last year. Penn State got off to that horrendous start, then they adjusted and won 4 consecutive games. Pitt finished 6-5. I think had they played at the end of the season, it would have been a close game, but Pitt certainly was blasted by some teams like Notre Dame. And they lost another ugly game in there somewhere. All right, hope I'm not missing anything here. I think our lunchtime has gone by us, and we'll wrap it up right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'm going to be back at 6 o'clock Eastern time for a call-in show on the Ohio State channel. Join us back here on Wednesday. So that's all Ohio State talk. So Ohio State haters, either join us, which would be great, 6 o'clock Eastern on the Ohio State channel, or stay far, far away. Tomorrow, Wednesday, 2 o'clock, Buckeyes Live. 6 o'clock, Seminoles Live. 8 o'clock is our call-in show with a very interesting topic. If you like the topic today and like these kind of topics and debates, one of the reasons I'm doing them is to get your feedback, and then what I will do is then produce a video if it seems to be something that you would like me to talk about. So disputed national championships, we've already done 1983, 84, and 90, and maybe 2000. I don't remember. Again, if we can get this video, which we typically get these live streams up to 1,000 views at least, get 100 likes, and get your comments down in the comment section. So if you're requesting that I review a year, leave that down in the comment section below. And if I get enough comments, 100, 100 votes total, then I will produce a video highlighting that particular season and any other season I'd like to do. In addition to that, we went through the 20 top coaching jobs in the country yesterday. I believe I'm going to follow up on that, produce a video on my perspective on that, my top 20 jobs. And then my way too early top 25, these notes have been here forever. I just need to produce the video. Now that National Signing Day has passed, I may tweak it slightly. I'll look at it. But I think I got my top 25 right there. I think I've locked in on that top 25. I think that's it. So my way too early top 25 is coming out, as well as coaches' rankings. A lot to get done here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Your individual contributions at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are much appreciated and keep us going. Otherwise, I'll have to be out in the cold and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll work for the crews that I see out there right now working on the snow next winter. All right, good to see everybody. We will see you next time. 6 o'clock Eastern on the Ohio State channel tonight. Tomorrow, 2, 6, and 8 right here. Totally Not Depressed is saying review FCS football this spring. I would do it, but nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody is going to watch that. Or I'd watch a game. Maybe I'll do that one time as a sample, just to see, as a case study. I'll watch one game, and then nobody's going to watch the video, and that will show that that's a waste of time. But I appreciate it. Enjoy your FCS football. I would like to watch the football, but nobody's going to watch this. Nobody's going to watch a review of teams they don't know. All right. Good to see everybody again. Tonight at 6, tomorrow 2, 6, and 8